Everyone's blaming Eva. Convenient. Here's why the real villain has been standing in plain sight. Interest is fading fast, and not because slow-burn storytelling is inherently sinful. The problem is that this particular slow burn keeps demanding patience while offering very little payoff. The endless waiting game, Hayley finally getting caught, the motorcycle crime finally being pinned on Leslie, or at this rate, on an as-yet uninvented third party, has become less suspenseful and more administrative. And the outrage over how long the Hayley poisoning Bill storyline is taking is especially rich, considering other soaps have dragged unresolved plots through the better part of a year, sometimes longer, with far less uproar. Evidently, endurance is a virtue, until it involves Hayley, at which point it becomes a humanitarian crisis. Meanwhile, the show keeps sprinkling in provocative questions as if asking them counts as answering them. Is the new grifter about to reverse the scam on Hayley and Randy? Or will that also be filed under eventually? Is Vanessa truly spiraling over Joey? Or is this a coordinated performance with Doug, staged for maximum spectacle and minimum accountability? And could Ted, in a rare act of decisiveness, simply purchase a house? Any house, so the storyline can stop orbiting basic real estate needs like they are profound character development? Speaking of orbiting, the romantic entanglements in Fairmont are starting to resemble a closed-loop recycling program. The same few men and women rotating through one another's lives as if the town is under a strict population cap. It is no wonder the mess keeps multiplying. There are no new variables, just the same choices repeated with slightly different lighting. Nicole's situation is the clearest example. Continuing with Dr. Rollins would at least suggest progress, or discernment, or a faint desire to avoid chaos. Carlton, by contrast, is pure mess. Ted's supposed right-hand man positioning himself as a romantic option is not complicated. It is disloyal, low, and unnecessary, especially given that the marriage in question was not some scorched earth disaster until Ted's mistakes lit the match. Ted may have failed, but Carlton choosing to capitalize on that failure is not romance. It is opportunism with better tailoring. And yes, Carlton will absolutely have feelings if Nicole dates Dr. Rollins, because nothing says supportive colleague like territorial outrage after behaving like a saboteur. Still, the moral panic about Nicole needs to be retired. Nicole is a single adult. She can kiss as many men as she wants. The truly scandalous behavior here is pretending she owes the town a purity clause. If the show wants consequences, it might start with the people actually manufacturing deceit. Hayley's eventual exposure is long overdue, and it would be deliciously efficient if Leslie's crimes surfaced at the same time, allowing the pair to share a cell, a matching set of prison stripes, and perhaps a spin-off called Beyond the Bars, a title that practically writes itself. It would also satisfy the recurring desire to see Prison Orange applied with enthusiasm to both of them, preferably side by side, for maximum poetic justice. Leslie, however, should at least commit to looking the part of her supposed wealth. The striped jumpsuit has been doing her no favors. It reads cheap on screen, an unfortunate polyester imitation of sophistication, when the character is meant to convey money, power, and taste. If the wardrobe cannot sell the illusion, the writing has even less chance. Then there is Eva, who has become the convenient punching bag while more calculating figures move quietly toward their goals. The fixation on bashing Eva looks increasingly misdirected, especially with suspicion building that Carlton and Leslie may have orchestrated parts of this mess together. The loudest accusations keep landing on the most obvious target, while the real demon watches, pleased from the corner. That said, Eva is not above critique. Sleeping with a man shortly after a breakup, particularly one who was still actively complaining about his girlfriend only hours earlier, is indefensible, and no amount of technical adulthood makes it less grimy. The skepticism about Eva being Ted's daughter also persists, with the sharper read being that Eva herself may know it and moves accordingly. Yet the demand that Eva should simply cut off her mother or turn her in, as if human relationships operate on a courtroom timer, is willfully naive. Soap operas have long revolved around children protecting, enabling, and rationalizing their parents' worst behavior, and real life is not exactly free of that pattern either. Expecting clean moral lines in a genre built on messy loyalty is not sophistication. It is selective amnesia, and while Eva deserves criticism for her choices, it is also worth noting the one consistently redeeming quality. She at least tries to check her mother back into reality, which is more than can be said for most of Fairmont's supposedly mature adults. Tomas, on the other hand, inspires no such generosity. The dislike is straightforward. He carries himself like a man who would make partner with whoever benefits him most, and the impression is that if he could align with Eva strategically, he would drop Kat without hesitation. He may care about Kat in a vague, convenient way, but love is not what is being portrayed. Kat's visibility outside the show, appearing on an episode of SVU, is a reminder that the actor can command attention even when the character is trapped in narrative circles. And because this town apparently exists in a cultural bubble, it is also amusing to watch characters behave as though the only casino in the region is Joey's one-room operation, as if larger, well-known venues simply do not exist within driving distance. It is the kind of detail that makes the world feel less like a city and more like a set with selective geography. As for Joey, the thirst surrounding him is reaching a level that reads less like passion and more like plot desperation. Vanessa, in particular, is becoming exhausting. Either she is genuinely unraveling or she is executing a scheme, but in both cases, the performance is grating. And looming over all of this is the most promising twist the show has dangled in a while. The possibility that Bill heard everything while he was lying unconscious, absorbing Hayley and Randy's conversation like a man taking notes in a coma. If that lands, it might finally justify the wait. If it does not, the audience will be left with what it already has: a roster of fascinating ideas, stretched thin, wrapped in recycled romance, and stalled just long enough to feel like strategy instead of storytelling. Everyone keeps screaming Team Kat or Team Eva, but that's the cutest distraction the writers ever pulled. Because the real villain is the show's commitment to unfinished storylines. Tomas's priorities are refreshingly clear, if not remotely romantic. Kat is a convenient accessory, and partner is the only commitment being pursued. Love may be complicated, but ambition is uncomplicated, and his has a business card. Then there is Eve, who somehow carries the moral burden of a storyline in which a mother allegedly ran a girl off the road and proceeded to treat accountability like an optional subscription. That detail is not messy backstory. It is the kind of bombshell that should detonate on screen, not sit in the corner like forgotten luggage. Speaking of suspicious luggage, Hayley's hostility toward Lynette at Bill's office invites a very specific question. Who exactly is Lynette, and why does Hayley look at her like a problem that needs erasing? The implication writes itself: identity theft, a clean frame job, and a desperate sprint to legal protection. Bill may be getting recruited as counsel, but he is also being positioned as a shield. Meanwhile, Thomas's living situation remains an interpretive dance: hotels, closets, vacations, and not a single stable address in sight. If the goal is to look established, perpetually checked in is an odd aesthetic. It also raises the more pointed question: does any of this meet Kat's standards, or is the relationship being staged in neutral locations because reality would be inconvenient? The Kat versus Eva tribal warfare continues with the endurance of a franchise that refuses cancellation. The debate is relentless, and the irony is that both women supply ample material for criticism. Kat has the privilege people work to secure for their children. Eva has the kind of rough-edged struggle narrative audiences can't resist. Neither is a saint. Both have attitude issues. Calling a spade would do everyone a favor, especially the viewers pretending this is a morality contest instead of a character study. Eva, however, does manage to deliver the kind of backbone the series needs, particularly when she stands up to Leslie. The problem is consistency. Defiance loses its meaning when it is followed by immediate surrender to manipulation. A complicated mother-daughter relationship is understandable. Letting it sabotage every boundary is simply repetitive. On the investigative side, the show keeps dangling a tantalizing thread and then refusing to pull it. If Malone and Leslie are allegedly cracking the case, when do Eva and Leslie start asking the obvious question: how did the gloves and helmet get back into the apartment? And while that is being ignored, Kat's legal exposure is quietly stacking up like unpaid parking tickets, breaking and entering twice, plus the small matter of planting evidence. Jail time should not be treated as a theoretical inconvenience. The series also excels at introducing plot lines with theatrical flair and then abandoning them as if object permanence is too demanding. What happened to Andre's documentary at the hospital? Has the world-renowned photographer done any photographing lately? Has Naomi had a client since the harassment case, or has her career been placed on indefinite hold? Has Jacob worked another case? Where did the Dirty Cop storyline go? Has Danny and Pamela's modeling agency booked a single client? What became of Smitty's story on Malone? And why is Ted still living in a hotel? By choice, by circumstance, or because the set budget has feelings? As for the supporting cast, Kyle is coming on too strong, as if intensity alone substitutes for chemistry. And Hayley'S sudden voice shifts into unhinged theatrics would be less puzzling if they felt intentional rather than random. The warning that she is going to catch somebody wrong may be meant as bravado, but it reads more like a future headline. Finally, the show has no shortage of paternity mysteries, including the lingering question of whether Leslie is Vernon's daughter, because nothing says family drama like surprise lineage emerging right on cue. Underneath all the chaos is one undeniable truth. Beyond the gates has people invested, arguing, second-guessing themselves, and even choosing silence to avoid the predictable backlash that follows any opinion. Credit where it is due, the cast delivers, the passion is real, and Season 2 has been welcomed like relief. The series just needs to decide whether it wants to resolve the stories it starts or continue treating continuity as a decorative suggestion. Here's what the free clinic plot is really about: not healing anyone, just hijacking the credit. Bill has acquired a new client who is, inconveniently for Hayley, strikingly attractive. Exactly the sort of development that turns a routine professional arrangement into a potential rivalry with a pulse. Meanwhile, the free clinic storyline continues its slow transformation from Samantha's meaningful project into Eva and Leslie's hostile acquisition, because nothing says charitable mission like quietly commandeering the idea while pretending it is merely funding. If this is meant to be a lesson for Samantha, the curriculum is clear. Be selective about who gets invited to the table, especially the kind of patrons who arrive with money in one hand and a takeover in the other. Kat, for all her imperfections, remains oddly perceptive about Eva and Leslie. Even when wrong, she manages to be right about the people most determined to prove her right. Elsewhere, Nicole appears to have two doctors circling, Ted and Carlton, with Carlton looking far more likely to close the deal, leaving Ted to consider the radical strategy of paying attention. Kat's declaration that this is the most serious relationship she has ever had lands with unintended comedy, considering it is also the only relationship in that category, which does simplify the ranking process. The week's forecast reads like classic soap escalation. Anita faces a cancer revelation. Vernon requests Andre's help with family photos, because nothing is ever just photos. Joey enlists Bill for a favor that will undoubtedly come with strings. And Hayley, consistent as ever, keeps digging, apparently committed to reaching the Earth's mantle. Casting chatter adds Lynette, recognizable from Country Wayne's sketchwork, while a perfectly timed reaction shot from June at Orphe Jeans, upon spotting Ted and Shanice together, does more narrative work than a page of dialogue. The programming gap over Saturday and Sunday feels less like scheduling and more like an unnecessary test of viewer patience, but devotion remains the only reliable constant here. Madison, however, seems determined to audition for the role of emotional compliance officer, taking offense at Chelsea's independence and acting as though Chelsea's feelings and agreements should be subject to approval, particularly when Chelsea's mother's views enter the conversation. Shanice's motives also deserve scrutiny. The apparent matchmaking for Nicole, ostensibly to land her with Ted, now plays less like friendly scheming and more like plot engineering with selective accountability. Credit where it is due. Kat's recent makeup work has been consistently excellent and should be treated as a non-negotiable production decision. Most importantly, the conversation between Danny and Kat finally gives the emotional spine of this saga room to breathe. The core issue is not a neat little demand for forgiveness, but the brutal reality that Eva did lasting damage, shattering a family unit and stripping Kat of an internal happiness she once carried. Danny understands that kind of injury, and for once the writing allows the point to land. Peace does not require pardoning the person who caused the wound, but it does require refusing to let the anger keep collecting rent. Kat did not need a lecture. She needed to be heard, understood, and validated as genuinely hurt. And Danny, having lived adjacent to that kind of loss, delivers exactly that. Never trust a man who suddenly wants to move in, especially when Eva is still in the picture. Tomas's sudden urgency to cohabitate is not romantic. It is strategic. When a relationship starts sounding like a housing application with emotional blackmail as the cosigner, it usually means someone is trying to control the variables, especially the one named Eva. And that, conveniently, is where this entire cast lives, in a gated community of secrets, half-truths, cover-ups, and nothing-to-see-here motives. The only thing more abundant than betrayal is the confidence with which everyone lies about it. A comprehensive inventory makes one point unavoidable. Nearly every character is hiding something, and most of it is either criminal, corrosive, or both. Randy Lawson operates with the precision of a man who thinks fraud is a personality trait. A secret family tie to Hayley Lawson doubles as a business partnership in a con scheme, with Lynette Wise as the willing accomplice, while he quietly maintains a separate loyalty track as Doug McBride's best friend, allegedly shielding him from Joey Armstrong. In a world where protecting someone often means protecting a secret, the distinction is mostly cosmetic. Hayley Lawson, meanwhile, is the sort of character who treats cause and effect as optional. She witnessed Bill kiss Danny and responded not with self-respect, but with attempted murder. A faked miscarriage, a convenient scapegoat in Danny, and the charming detail that she secretly loves Bill despite trying to end him all combine into a single thesis: volatility is the only consistent feature. Vanessa McBride is juggling the classic triad: criminal activity carefully hidden from her daughters, an affair with Joey Armstrong, and a working knowledge, or at minimum a strong suspicion, of Joey's involvement in Doug's death, which is being leveraged like a private equity asset. Nothing says family values quite like monetizing a homicide-adjacent affair. Joey Armstrong carries the heavier portfolio: Doug McBride's death, corruption, secret business dealings, and the aforementioned affair. The pattern is straightforward: violence, vice, and the unshakable belief that consequences are for other people. Vernon Dupree belongs to the older school of institutional rot: cover-ups, corruption, and the moral flexibility required to protect Martin's crime. His secret meetings with Sharon might be innocent, perhaps even as dull as singing lessons, but the optics are doing him no favors. When a man has already helped bury one truth, no one is obligated to believe he is merely nurturing vocal range. Naomi Hamilton Hawthorne and Jacob Hawthorne bring the domestic version of secrecy: the hidden desire for divorce, a conflict over children, and the unexplained medical reality behind a not-pregnant result. Jacob's own concealment is more political. He knows about Elon Hawthorne and Marcel Malone's corruption and stays quiet under threat from his father. Even in the marriage plotline, coercion remains the family heirloom. Kat Richardson is not so much hesitant to commit as she is committed to weaponizing commitment. Staying with Thomas functions as revenge against Eva, dressed up as a relationship. Her reluctance to move forward is rooted in distrust, but the performance suggests something more pointed: control. If this were truly about being above Eva, there would be no need for constant surveillance, interference, and pressure campaigns to keep Tomas away from her. People who feel secure do not need to recruit half the neighborhood to enforce it. Danny Dupree plays the quieter form of deceit, concealing that Bill kissed her twice from her husband, Andre, likely because unresolved feelings are inconvenient when married life is meant to appear intact. Ashley Morgan operates under a different kind of denial, hiding her true feelings for Andre Richardson while proposing to Derek Baldwin out of duty, guilt, or fear of admitting the obvious. Derek, for his part, faked paralysis or injury to manipulate Ashley, proving that nothing says husband material like manufacturing a medical crisis for leverage. Martin Richardson sits in the center of older bloodstains, a past homicide and cover-up involving Vernon. Bill Hamilton is connected through police corruption and the broader cover-up network surrounding Martin's crime, which ties into Elon Hawthorne's involvement in the same corrupt ecosystem that Vernon later exploited. Ted Richardson adds another shadow, a secret past linked to Eva's arrival and the Martin-Vernon cover-up, suggesting that Eva is less a new disruption than a long-deferred reckoning. Marcel Malone contributes the sleazier, more opportunistic kind of investigation, flirting with Leslie Thomas while hiding behind professional pretenses. Anita Dupree rewrites history itself, concealing the truth about the Articulettes' founding and the fact that she was not the real founder, because in this town, even legacy requires laundering. Caroline's secret is simpler, but no less combustible. She is secretly in love with Bill Hamilton, a sentiment that will inevitably be treated as destiny rather than a warning. Against this landscape, the central conflict is not subtle. Every maneuver to keep Tomas away from Eva reads like a panic response to a perceived inevitability. The more aggressively Kat tries to posture as unbothered, the more obvious the threat becomes. Her bitterness, insecurity, and hostility are not side traits. They are the mechanism of her undoing. The need to control everything and use everyone around her as an emotional support system is not strength. It is desperation in formal wear, and the outcome telegraphs itself with exhausting clarity. Despite the desperate attempts to barricade Tomas away from Eva, Eva is positioned to win. Kat's downfall will not be tragic. It will be earned. Vanessa isn't chasing love, she's chasing control, and Joey is finally acting like he noticed. There is, apparently, an urgent need for a DNA test involving Ted and Eva, Leslie and Eva, and Nicole and Eva, because the resemblance and relational overlap are becoming so suspicious that the plot is practically begging for a lab report. And then there is Vanessa, tirelessly committed to making every scene feel like an endurance test. The performance is equal parts clingy and catastrophic, the kind of relentless emotional pressure that doesn't build intimacy, it builds exit routes. Joey is visibly running out of patience with the whining, the demands, and the escalating entitlement. The strategy seems to be push, pout, repeat, until the man either caves or disappears. Given the way he keeps saying no, the outcome seems less like romance and more like a slow-motion cutoff. The sequence of Vanessa's decisions reads like a checklist for self-sabotage. First came the insistence on going public with a situationship that clearly wasn't built for daylight. Then came the push for commitment from someone who looks allergic to the concept. Each refusal is met with theatrical sulking, as if being told no is a personal injustice rather than an answer. Meanwhile, the unresolved grief over Doug's death continues to linger awkwardly in the background, waiting for the dignity of proper mourning instead of being treated like an inconvenient subplot. As if that were not enough, Vanessa's downward spiral accelerates into outright absurdity, forcing Donald back to school so she can pivot into the role of a gangster's wife with Joey. It is difficult to tell what is more alarming, the manipulation or the casual fantasy makeover where everyone else must rearrange their lives to support it. The show's production choices do not help. The hairstyling and makeup regularly look unpolished, undermining the characters rather than elevating them. It is hard to take emotional stakes seriously when the visual presentation keeps suggesting no one backstage is equally invested. By contrast, the Kat and Martin scenes deliver something rare: authenticity. Their sibling dynamic doesn't feel manufactured. Their reconciliation feels earned, and the relief is obvious. Two characters who genuinely missed each other and finally behave like it. Those moments land precisely because they do not beg for attention. They simply work. Elsewhere, suspicion gathers around Bill's world. Lynette, his client, has ties to Hayley, and the resemblance is strong enough to raise the obvious possibilities, sisters or cousins. And since Bill has built an entire brand on cheating, it would be entirely on character for his eye to wander in Lynette's direction. If it happens, the appropriate response is not outrage, it is acknowledgement. Consequences have a name, and it is karma. Speaking of consequences, Bill's wife drugging him into oblivion has become so excessive, it risks turning the storyline into parody. The frequency and intensity are no longer shocking. They are exhausting. The kind of repetitive menace that drains the tension instead of sharpening it. Eva, meanwhile, continues to perform selective disbelief. The Dupree's hiring protection for Laura in response to Leslie and Dana is not exactly a wild overreaction. It is the kind of rational security step that should not require commentary. Yet the reaction arrives anyway, as if common sense is an unexpected plot twist. Add to that Eva's increasingly dubious posture regarding what her mother did, and it becomes difficult to maintain sympathy. Acting unaware does not read as innocence, it reads as convenience. At this point, loyalty to Eva is becoming harder to justify. Then there is Shanice, playing matchmaker by setting Nicole up with Kial, an arrangement that may look generous on paper and questionable in practice. Nicole deserves happiness, yes. Ted deserves to move forward, yes. But the divorce is still fresh, the emotional ties are still visible, and the timing feels less like healing and more like repositioning. It is hard to ignore the possibility that the setup is not purely about Nicole's future, but about keeping Ted pleasantly occupied while Shanice's own prospects with him quietly develop. Nicole may shrug it off, or she may not. A history of interest in Ted's friend and colleague suggests flexibility, but the situation has the potential to curdle the moment feelings deepen, and that, ultimately, is the larger problem. This is being presented as drama, but it plays like a prolonged family loop with very little payoff. The story lingers, circles, and lingers again, stretching everyday tension until it becomes background noise. What's missing is urgency, real suspense, real stakes, the kind of edge-of-the-seat momentum that makes the next episode feel necessary rather than merely scheduled.